I bought a set of Vespid lenses right before the Arles was released, and if I knew these lenses were going to be out, I would have compared them before I made my purchase, but they weren't, so here we are. In my last video, we compared the Arles 35 to the Vespid 35, and I could tell a difference, but I wasn't sure if it was enough for me to sell my 7-lens Vespid kit for 4 or 5 Arles lenses, based on those tests alone. Now that I have the 50 and 100mm in from DZO on loan, let's run through some tests and see if eBay will be getting a set of Vespids soon. This video is sponsored by Motion Array, but more on them later. Why am I still holding this? First up, what do I want in a set of lenses? I want a set of lenses that I can use on my commercial projects, as well as these YouTube videos and my short films. My clients really aren't pixel peeping the image, so I want to be more confident that I like the look of these and that they're not too stylized to where my clients are going to think that something's off with the videos that I'm making for them. I'd like to have some character, but not over the top where it's distracting. I also want to own a set of lenses, and at a certain price point, it just doesn't make sense for me to own a $30,000 set of Vista Primes. I'll just rent those if I need them. But for a 5-lens kit of the Arles for under 10 grand is very achievable for the work that I do. Or even better, the 7-lens kit of Vespids that I already own and are paid off. I originally settled on the Vespids for their consistent look, their character look in general, and the options of the focal lengths and especially the price. The Arles are very close in price in the scheme of things. So I'm wondering, is it worth it for me to sell my Vespids, potentially take a hit on them, to invest in an Arles set? Let's go through some tests and I'll tell you what I think at the end. Here's a chart of specs comparing these two lenses. You can pause the video if you want to read this further. The specs that stood out to me were price, aperture, size, weight, and filter differences. The price of the Arles lenses right now are $2,150 per lens, or $9,700 for the 5-lens set. The Vespids are going for about $1,400 per lens. More specialized lenses are more, like the 12mm is $1,800, and the 90mm macro is $1,650, but you can get a set of 7 for $6,500, or $3,200 less than the Arles set. Ignoring price breaks for multiple days, the current rental rate of my Vespid kit is $500 a day. So I could use these Vespids 13 times and they've paid for themselves, and I'm making money on them after that. For a set of Arles lenses, the current rate of the 5-lens kit is also $500 a day. So I would have to rent them out 19.5 times before they would make me money. Not a huge difference, but a difference. When it comes to filter sizes, this is stressing me out. When it comes to filter sizes, there is a pretty big difference here, and if I'm being honest, it's a bit of a pain in the ass. The 35mm Vespid and all of the Vespids have 77mm front threads, while the Arles has 86mm front threads. If you're using clamp-on matte boxes, the front diameter of the Vespids is 80mm, and the front diameter of the Arles is 95mm. Honestly, this is a pain as I have a ton of 77 and 82mm filters for my FX3 that I already use with my photo glass. And if I want to use NDs with my Arles set right now, I am stuck using either a matte box or my FX6 with internal NDs. And the Polar Pro VNDs that I like to use, the Peter McKinnon ones, are not available in 86mm right now. So that means I would have to use a step-up ring from 86 to 95 and then buy the 95mm version of this VND. If I wanted to just run a small, lightweight kit and not use a matte box here. But honestly, I hate using step-up rings so much, especially when I'm out shooting, moving a VND on the front of my camera. I would just rather use a matte box here. Taking a quick second from the Arles versus Vespid video to tell you about today's sponsor, Motion Array. Editing is by far the most time-consuming part of making videos for me, and Motion Array helps speed that up. Motion Array has tons of high-quality video templates, footage, photos, music, sound effects, and more that you can use in your personal and commercial projects. Motion Array has thousands of assets, and they break it down so it's easy to find exactly what you're looking for. They have motion graphic overlays, loops, animations, transitions, and more to help add interest to your videos. There are video templates to help you save time making titles, infographics, logo reveals, and transitions. They also have LUTs for all popular editors like Resolve, Premiere, After Effects, and Final Cut. They have collections of stock footage that actually look good, and they have clips from the same collection so you can use multiple clips from the same scene. Motion Ray also has an automated tool to automatically clear any copyright issues so you can remove the headache of copyright claims. To try out Motion Ray, you can sign up for a free account and access a small amount of the free assets, or subscribe to a monthly or yearly plan for access to their entire library to use in your personal and commercial projects. If you use the link in my description, wherever it is, you can get $50 off when you subscribe today. Thank you, Motion Ray, for sponsoring this video. Onto the build quality and weight of these lenses, the Vespids feel like they're very heavy compared to photo lenses, but the Arles are just chunky boys. Comparing the 35mm, the Vespid is 3.4 inches long and 1.8 pounds, while the Arles is 4.8 inches long and 3.6 pounds. The Arles is literally double the weight of the Vespid, and you can feel the difference right when you're picking them up, especially when you're using them for long periods of time. The size and weight differences between the lenses in the Vespid set kind of vary depending on which lens you're using, but the weight and size between the Arles lenses are very consistent. While using the Arles on my FX6 and FX3, I was able to notice the weight difference right away because I was so used to using my set of Vespids that are much lighter, so the difference was very apparent right away for me. I didn't usually think about this when I was using my Vespids, but with the Arles, there were a few times where I thought I should actually be using the lens support. If I was using a matte box on the front of this lens, I would definitely add a support. I took the lens support off on the 35, but you can see that the 50 has the lens support on the bottom. This just adds a little bit more of an expense. If you already have a matte box, it's not that much of an expense, but when you're using these lenses, now you have to use rods with your matte box to have any kind of a lens support. So while it's not maybe a huge expense, it is an expense in time. One of the claims DZO does make is the Arles series features a specifically calibrated blue coating to minimize reflections and effectively reduce stray light and ghosting. While I think the Vespids are a little more vintage skewing, I feel like the Arles are supposed to be a little more cleaner and well controlled, but the flaring is one area that you can tell a difference between these two lenses here. The Vespids are warmer and have more flare, while the Arles is cooler and has more subtle flaring. I don't prefer one over the other, but this is largely dependent on what your project needs. For a commercial clean look, I would probably lean on the Arles, but for a more stylized shoot, the Vespids are totally fine for my taste. No clear winner or loser here, but it just depends on what you need for your project. Bokeh is another way to tell the difference between the T2.1 and T1.4, and there is quite a difference here in my opinion. Here is a test showing the bokeh difference, and this is a great way to tell the difference between wide open T1.4 and T2.1. I don't have the 100mm Vespid to compare to the Arles, but here is a comparison of the bokeh in a few different situations. When it comes to bokeh, of course I have to give it to the Arles on this one. Whenever I'm testing a lens, as boring as it is, I like to shoot the same chart just to get an idea of how the lenses perform. I shot some charts at 4x3 with my A7R5 at 60 megapixels, so these results will clean up on the 16x9 full frame sensors like the FX6, or even better on the Super 35 sensor on the FX30. I have examples of these quickly at the end. All three of the Arles primes are sharp, wide open in the center, when the edges are a little bit soft. The 35 and 50mm edges sharpened up around T4, while the 100mm took till T5.6 to be as sharp as the center. All three of them had vignetting wide open, but was significantly improved by T8 and completely gone by T4. I like testing like this since I typically film people around T2.8 to 5.6 and products around T8 to 11. That's not how I shoot all the time, but those are my go-to ranges. Here are some charts with my full frame FX6 and Super 35 FX30 for a quick comparison. On the FX6, the edges sharpened up and the vignette was gone by around T2.8. And the FX30, the edges sharpened up and the vignette was gone around T2 to T2.8. Not surprising here, as we started with a larger image circle and cropping down to Super 35 will clean up a little faster. While I do like to shoot 60 megapixel photos at 4x3 to see the full image of these lenses, I don't have a camera that can shoot 4x3 video right now, so I understand having full frame and Super 35 in this test is helpful as well. While the optical quality of these lenses is pretty great when shooting a boring chart, one of my favorite ways to use these lenses is wide open, and at this price point I was very surprised how the Arles rendered subjects at T14, as long as you're able to keep them in focus. You're really able to separate your subjects, and the chef's kiss with these lenses is using them wide open and backlighting your subject. The amount of separation you're able to get with hard backlight at T14 is fantastic. I think this is what contributes to that 3D image-like quality that these lenses have, and if you're looking for a very clean yet pleasing look, I think these are great in my opinion. I was a little surprised at the color cast that the Arles produces though. These lenses skew pretty warm, especially when comparing them to my Vespids that I thought already skewed warm. When looking at the vector scopes of my color checker, you can see that the magenta, blue, and cyan are relatively close to their targets, but the green skews yellow, the yellow is pretty much on target, and the red also skews yellow. I shot a few short clips of my color checker passport with the color cast of the 30, 50, and 100, and I will have that linked in my store below if you're interested in some correction LUTs. I like the look of these, and I tend to like a warmer look altogether, but I could see some situations where this would be a little too warm and you need to do some color correcting. When it comes to focus breathing, in my testing the Vespids have some focus breathing, but it isn't that much. You'd notice if you're doing huge focus racks wide open, but at this price point, I thought it was an acceptable amount. The Arles, however, has fantastic focus breathing performance. If there was any focus breathing on these lenses, I wasn't able to tell doing wide open focus racks. Gotta give it to the Arles here. One thing I was concerned about was using the Arles on a gimbal. I like to use the smaller DJI handheld gimbals since I can use them for long periods of time handheld without the need of an EasyRig or some kind of support. I tested out the Arles on my RS4 Pro with my FX3 and was able to get these lenses to balance, but the weight difference was definitely noticeable over time. My go-to gimbal setup is the RS4 Pro with the LiDAR Pro and the Focus Pro motors for LiDAR autofocus, but I still have the ability to use manual focus on the front gimbal wheel if I need it. The whole camera setup weighed 7.2 pounds with the 35mm Vespid, or the Arles weighed 8.5 pounds. Adding the DJI transmission, battery, and cables adds 2.5 more pounds to the payload. The RS4 Pro is rated to hold a payload of 10 pounds. So the payload of the entire Vespid setup was just over 9.5 pounds, and the total payload of the Arles setup was 11 pounds. So if you want to use the Arles with the LiDAR, focus motors, and the DJI transmission, you would be over the weight limit, and you need to use the Ronin 2 then, which is way heavier and much more expensive. You would be able to use this entire setup with the Vespid set though. Thinking of that additional weight has me thinking about my EasyRig as well. I have the Minimax with the stable light arm, and the capacity for that whole thing is 15 pounds. So as long as I don't start adding more things to my camera, the additional 1.8 pounds over my Vespid setup shouldn't be a problem at all, thank God. Just based on image quality between the Vespids and the Arles, all other things being equal, I think the Arles is definitely worth the extra money compared to the Vespids. However, when it comes to the comparison, that's not exactly fair because there's actually a lot of differences between these once you start using them. The larger size and weight comes with more expensive 95mm filters, or you're using an 86mm to a 95mm step-up ring, or you're just using a matte box. That might not be a difference if you have a matte box that you use all the time, but I like to take my smaller Sony cameras, just have a thread-on VND or mist filter, and let it rip sometimes. Will I be selling my Vespids to fund a set of Arles? Yes and no. I will be not selling my Vespids just yet. I love the size and weight of these lenses, and having the ability to just throw these on a lightweight gimbal setup, or if I'm putting these on a car, I would much rather put my Vespids in harm's way than these heavier, more expensive Arles lenses. They are a little bit more contrasty than the Arles for sure. Another reason I'm not selling my Vespids for the Arles set yet is because the set that I want is not available yet. I'd love to get the B kit of the Arles, which is the 14, 21, 40, 135 and 180, but I'd probably sub the 180 for a 75 or 100 millimeter, or even better, a 90 millimeter macro, but they need to make that macro first. At any rate, I'll be using my set of Vespids to charge clients to fund my next set of Arles lenses, and then surely I'll be done buying lenses for a while. Right? Right?